Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory, my dad is a high school assistant principal. He started at a new school this past August, and it's a huge upgrade from his last position. His previous school was overcrowded, had serious drug problems, and most students qualified for free or reduced lunches. He had to deal with weekly fights and daily suspensions. His new school is completely different. They've only had two notable incidents this entire semester, one involving a student with autism who had a difficult day, and the story I'm about to share. Cast: my dad, Mr. Thompson; Karen, entitled Mom; Tyler, entitled Brother; Ashley, entitled Sister; Rachel, entitled Daughter; Mike, the bus driver; Judge Martinez; Sarah Chen, school systems lawyer; James Wilson, Karen's lawyer; Dr. Roberts, principal; and Officer Garcia, school resource officer. The incident happened in late October 2024. From what I understand, either Mike accidentally brushed against Rachel while she was getting off the bus, or he called her out for being disrespectful. I'm not entirely sure which. Either way, Rachel immediately texted her mom about it. Karen stormed out of her house screaming at Mike, "How dare you touch my daughter? I'll have your job for this." Mike, being professional, just closed the doors and drove away. The next morning, Mike pulled up to their driveway for the usual pickup, but instead of Rachel, he found Karen, Tyler, and Ashley waiting. When he opened the door to ask about Rachel's whereabouts, all three of them barged onto the bus. "You think you can just get away with disrespecting my family?" Karen screamed, getting right in Mike's face. Tyler, who was around 22, joined in. "You better watch your back, old man." Ashley, who should have been at college instead of participating in this circus, started filming while hurling insults. "We're gonna make sure you never drive a bus again." The elementary and middle school kids on the bus were terrified. As soon as the family finally got off, Mike floored it to the school and went straight to the office. My dad was livid when he saw the footage from the bus's 4 HD cameras with audio. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he told Mike. "We're gonna handle this." He immediately called Officer Garcia, who brought in additional officers. Karen was arrested that afternoon for malicious harassment, intimidation, trespassing, and several other charges. Dr. Roberts gave my dad full authority to handle the situation, knowing his reputation for dealing with serious incidents. My dad's first moves were swift. Rachel was transferred to a different bus route, her family members were permanently banned from school property, and Mike got a month of paid leave. But that was just the beginning. Working with Sarah Chen, they collected statements from the students on the bus. They decided to press charges against Karen and Tyler, who was already on probation for a previous offense. At the trial in early December, nobody expected much, maybe a week in jail for Karen, if anything. My dad, Dr. Roberts, and Officer Garcia attended as potential witnesses, though they weren't called. During the proceedings, Judge Martinez listened intently as Sarah presented the case. Karen's lawyer barely put up a fight, knowing the evidence was overwhelming. Then Judge Martinez delivered his verdict. "Mrs. Karen Mitchell, you endangered children, threatened a public servant, and trespassed on school property, all because a bus driver did his job. 30 days in county jail." My dad and Dr. Roberts had to suppress their grins, but the best was yet to come. Tyler, incredibly, skipped his own trial scheduled right after his mom's. Judge Martinez immediately issued a bench warrant. When they found him hiding at Karen's house the next day, he wasn't so tough anymore. "Your Honor, I can explain," Tyler started. "Save it." Judge Martinez cut him off. 1 year in state prison for probation violation, failure to appear, and the original charges. Rachel transferred schools after that, probably too embarrassed to show her face again. My dad still tells this story at every opportunity, especially the part about Tyler's spectacular self-sabotage. Sometimes, he likes to say, people's worst enemies are themselves. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I never thought I'd be writing one of these stories, but here we are. This all started about 2 years ago when I inherited my grandfather's property, a beautiful 5-acre plot of land in an upscale suburban area. The property had been in our family for over 60 years, predating the surrounding development and homeowners association community next door. My grandfather was a smart man. He specifically refused to join the homeowners association when developers started building the luxury community beside his property in the early 2000s. He kept meticulous records of property surveys, boundaries, and all correspondence with the homeowners association and developers. Thank goodness he did, because those documents would end up being crucial later on. Enter Karen, not her real name, the homeowners association president of the neighboring community. She bought the mansion next door to my property about a year ago and immediately started making my life difficult. She'd constantly complain about my unsightly vegetable garden that my grandfather had maintained for decades. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes about my classic car collection, all properly registered and maintained, being an eyesore. I mostly ignored her since her homeowners association had zero jurisdiction over my property. Things really kicked off when Karen decided to build an expansion to her already massive 8,000 square feet mansion. The plans included a new wing with an indoor pool, spa, and entertainment area. I didn't pay much attention initially since it was her property, or so I thought. One day I came home from work to find construction crews had cleared a 30-foot wide strip of my land along the property line. They'd cut down several 100-year-old oak trees my grandfather had planted and destroyed part of his beloved garden. I immediately called the police and my lawyer. When the police arrived, Karen came storming over, waving some papers. "This is all perfectly legal," she shrieked. "The Homeowners Association Board approved the construction plans." I kept my cool and replied, "The Homeowners Association has no authority over my property. I'm not a member." "This is Homeowners Association property," she insisted. "It's clearly marked on the development plans." My lawyer arrived shortly after, and I showed him my grandfather's documentation. The property line was crystal clear. Karen's construction crew had encroached a full 30 feet onto my land. "You need to stop all construction immediately," my lawyer informed her. "You're trespassing and causing damage to my client's property." Karen turned red in the face. "Do you know who I am? I'm the Homeowners Association president. I've lived here for 20 years. A blatant lie, since she'd only moved in last year. "That's irrelevant," my lawyer replied calmly. "The property records clearly show this land belongs to my client. Stop construction now, or we'll seek an immediate injunction." Karen stomped off, but the construction continued the next day. So we went to court and got an emergency injunction to halt the work. That's when things got really interesting. During discovery, we found emails showing Karen knew perfectly well she was building on my property. She had obtained a survey 6 months earlier clearly showing the boundaries. Her plan was to build quickly and try to claim adverse possession, betting that I wouldn't fight back. What she didn't count on was my grandfather's documentation and my determination to protect his legacy. The judge was not amused by her attempts to steamroll over property rights. In court, Karen's lawyer tried arguing that since the Homeowners Association had approved the plans, they must be valid. The judge shut that down immediately. "The Homeowners Association's authority ends at its boundaries," the judge stated firmly. "They have zero jurisdiction over the plaintiff's property. The fact that you proceeded with construction after being notified of the encroachment shows willful disregard for property rights." Karen then tried claiming she had a prescriptive easement due to Homeowners Association maintenance activities on that strip of land. Again, my grandfather's records saved the day, showing he had actively maintained that area himself and had sent multiple letters over the years asserting his property rights. The judge ruled entirely in my favor. Karen was ordered to immediately halt all construction, remove all construction materials and equipment from my property, pay for removal of the partially built structure, pay for replacement of the trees. The arborist valued the century-old oaks at over $150,000 each. Restore my grandfather's garden, pay my legal fees, pay punitive damages for willful trespassing. The total came to just over $1.2 million. Karen's face went white when the judgment was read. But, this will bankrupt me," she sputtered. "You should have thought of that before deliberately building on someone else's property," the judge replied. But wait, it gets better. During the case, other Homeowners Association residents learned what their president had done. They were furious about the potential liability to the Homeowners Association. It turned out Karen had been using Homeowners Association funds to pay for part of her expansion, claiming it would be a community space. The Homeowners Association Board called an emergency meeting. When residents learned their dues had been misappropriated for Karen's personal mansion expansion, they voted overwhelmingly to remove her as president and initiated their own lawsuit against her for financial misconduct. I attended that meeting as an observer, and let me tell you, it was better than any reality TV show. "You've made us a laughingstock," one elderly resident shouted. "I've lived here for 15 years, and we've never had such embarrassment." Another resident, a retired lawyer, stood up and said, "I've reviewed the Homeowners Association finances. She spent over $200,000 of our money on consulting fees for this illegal construction project. That's money that was supposed to go to maintaining our community pool and parks." Karen tried defending herself. "Everything I did was for the betterment of our community. That expansion would have increased all our property values." "By stealing someone's land?" another resident shot back. "By cutting down 100-year-old trees? By misusing our money?" The new Homeowners Association board was much more reasonable to deal with. They formally apologized to me and worked to repair relationships between the Homeowners Association community and my property. They even offered to plant new trees along the property line, on their side, as a gesture of goodwill. Karen refused to pay the judgment initially, claiming bankruptcy. But my lawyer discovered she had transferred several assets to her sister's name just before the court date, a big no-no. The judge was not amused by this attempted fraud and ordered her assets frozen. To pay the judgment, Karen had to sell her mansion. Ironically, I ended up buying it at the foreclosure auction for well below market value, liquidate her investment accounts, sell her vacation home in Florida, surrender her collection of luxury cars. The schadenfreude was delicious when I watched her expensive furniture being hauled out of the mansion. My grandfather would have gotten a good laugh out of it. But the best part? I converted Karen's partially built spa wing foundation into a beautiful greenhouse where I now grow vegetables and flowers just like my grandfather did. The new Homeowners Association board even gave me an award for Best Garden during their spring community event, an ironic twist considering Karen's initial complaints about my grandfather's garden being an eyesore. I also used some of the settlement money to establish a local environmental scholarship in my grandfather's name, specifically for students studying land conservation and environmental law. The first recipient was actually Karen's neighbor's daughter, who had always admired my grandfather's garden when she was growing up. Last I heard, Karen moved to a small condo in another state. She tried running for Homeowners Association president there too, but apparently someone found the news articles about this case and shared them with that community. Her bid for Homeowners Association presidency failed spectacularly. The new Homeowners Association president next door is a retired judge who understands property rights perfectly well. We have a great relationship. She often brings me fresh-baked cookies in exchange for vegetables from my greenhouse. Her first official act was to establish clear guidelines about respecting property boundaries and maintaining positive relationships with neighboring non-Homeowners Association properties. As for me, I'm enjoying life in my expanded property. The mansion makes a great home office, and I rent out part of it as a high-end event venue. The income more than covers property taxes and maintenance. I kept one room as a small museum dedicated to my grandfather, displaying his original property documents and photos of the land over the years. Recently, I received a letter from Karen's adult daughter, apologizing for her mother's behavior and asking if she could visit the garden her grandfather had told her about when she was little. Turns out her grandfather, Karen's ex-husband, had been friends with my grandfather years ago. I gave her a tour, and now she volunteers at the greenhouse every weekend, learning about gardening and helping maintain the legacy her mother tried to destroy. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. Keep meticulous records. You never know when you'll need them. Stand your ground when you're in the right. Karma eventually catches up with entitled people. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and preserving what matters. My grandfather always said, "Land is precious. Once it's gone, you can't make more of it." He protected this property for over 60 years, and I'm honored to continue his legacy. The trees we planted to replace the ones Karen destroyed are growing strong, and maybe someday they'll be as magnificent as the ones my grandfather planted. As for the Homeowners Association community, they've become good neighbors. We collaborate on community events, and their residents often volunteer in my greenhouse. Some have even started their own vegetable gardens, inspired by my grandfather's legacy. I still have all the court documents framed in my office. A reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it would be easier to give in. My grandfather would be proud. The most satisfying part? Every morning I drink my coffee in the greenhouse, surrounded by thriving plants and sunlight streaming through windows, knowing that this space, originally intended for Karen's private spa, is now being used exactly as my grandfather would have wanted. To grow food, build community, and preserve a piece of family history. That's justice served with a side of homegrown tomatoes. Update. 2 years later. A lot has happened since my last post, and I thought you all might appreciate an update on the situation. The karma train just keeps on rolling. Remember Karen? Well, she tried to sue me again last year. This time, she claimed that since she had started the construction before I discovered it, she had established rights to the property. Her new lawyer, a cousin of hers, filed what had to be the most poorly researched adverse possession claim I've ever seen. My lawyer actually laughed when he got the paperwork. In our state, adverse possession requires 20 years of continuous, open, and hostile use of the property. Karen had owned her house for barely 2 years when she started building. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice and ordered her to pay my legal fees again. But here's where it gets really interesting. During the proceedings, we discovered Karen had been running a scam in her new condo community. She had set up a fake property management company and was charging residents extra fees for special services that were actually covered by their regular homeowners association dues. The FBI got involved because she was using the mail to commit fraud. She's now facing federal charges. Turns out my case wasn't the first time she'd tried to steal property. There were 3 other incidents in different states where she'd attempted similar land grabs. She just hadn't run into someone with documentation as solid as my grandfather's before. As for the mansion I bought at foreclosure, it's become a real community asset. I converted the main floor into an event space and educational center. We host gardening classes, environmental workshops, and community meetings. The greenhouse, built on what was supposed to be Karen's spa, is now part of a local school program teaching kids about sustainable agriculture. Karen's daughter Emily has become an integral part of the operation. She completed her master's degree in environmental science and now runs our educational programs. The irony isn't lost on anyone that she's teaching kids in the space her mother tried to steal. My mom always cared more about appearances than substance, Emily told me recently. Working here, helping things grow, teaching kids, it feels like I'm finally doing something real. The Homeowners Association community has completely transformed too. The new board, led by retired Judge Patricia, has implemented what they call the Good Neighbor policy. They actually reduced Homeowners Association fees by 15% by cutting out unnecessary restrictions and focusing on genuine community improvements. Last month, we had an interesting visitor, Karen's ex-husband, Robert. He brought along some old photos of him and my grandfather from the 1980s. They used to fish together in the creek that runs through the property. He shared stories about how my grandfather helped him start his first vegetable garden. "Your grandfather was right about Karen," Robert said, shaking his head. "He warned me about her obsession with status and control. I should have listened." The scholarship fund in my grandfather's name has grown significantly. We now support 5 students each year studying environmental law or sustainable agriculture. One of our first recipients just passed the bar exam and is working for an environmental justice nonprofit. Remember those replacement trees we planted? They're thriving. The arborist says they're growing faster than expected, probably because of the rich soil my grandfather spent decades nurturing. We installed a small plaque near them that reads, "In memory of the original oaks, may these new guardians stand as long as their predecessors." The legal precedent from our case has helped other property owners stand up to aggressive homeowners associations. My lawyer has been consulted on several similar cases, and judges have cited our case in their rulings. It's satisfying to know that my grandfather's meticulous record-keeping is still protecting property rights, even beyond our own land. As a final twist of fate, Karen's fake property management company had been operating under the name Premier Heritage Properties. After her arrest, I legally registered that name for our educational center. Now, when people Google her old company name, they find our community programs instead of her scams. The greenhouse has expanded into a full teaching facility. We're partnering with the local community college to offer certificates in sustainable agriculture. Last harvest, we donated over 5,000 pounds of produce to local food banks, all grown on land that was meant to be Karen's private spa. My grandfather's old documents and photos are now properly archived and digitized. We've created an online database for property owners dealing with homeowners association disputes, sharing resources and legal precedents. It's become a valuable tool for people facing similar situations. The property feels more alive than ever. We host monthly community dinners where everyone brings dishes made with vegetables from our gardens. Even some of Karen's former supporters in the Homeowners Association have become regular volunteers. Looking back, I'm grateful for my grandfather's foresight and determination to protect this land. What Karen saw as just another piece of real estate to exploit has become a living legacy of education, community, and growth. As I write this, I'm sitting in what would have been Karen's indoor pool room. Instead of chlorine and luxury spa equipment, it's filled with seedlings and the sound of students learning about soil composition. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well. It's creating something meaningful from someone else's attempted destruction. I'd like to think my grandfather is somewhere, looking down at his beloved garden, seeing it grow and evolve in ways even he couldn't have imagined. And maybe, just maybe, he's having a good laugh about how his careful documentation ended up planting the seeds of justice. That's all for now. I've got a gardening class to teach. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I, 33F, unexpectedly gave birth 2 months earlier than my due date. Thankfully, baby and I are doing great, and we've now made it home. As you can imagine, coming that early meant baby needed a rather long stay in the infant spa. a NICU. Now that we're home and I've been able to process everything, I wanted to share a moment of malicious compliance that helped bring some levity to a really scary experience. One of the most important things for a baby, especially preemies, is skin-to-skin time, which is where mothers or fathers will be either topless or open their shirts to cuddle their infant. Baby struggled with jaundice, so our skin-to-skin time was very limited at first because of light therapy. We had been moved to a new location in the NICU, right next to another baby and across from two others. A standard of care in the NICU is monitoring the baby's breathing, heart rate, and oxygen levels. These monitors look like an old-school tube TV and are approximately 16 inches by 16 inches and can display babies in other areas as well if the nurses need. So I'm new to this little care area, and I'm getting ready to set up the hospital-provided screen so I can get my skin-to-skin time, but realize I may end up blocking the monitor for the baby next to me from the nurse. I ask the nurse if she can still see or if my setup was blocking anything for her. Obviously, I don't want to interfere with the care of another patient. She tells me everything was good, so I settle in for some much-needed snuggles. Not even 10 minutes later, I feel someone in my space, and look up to see a woman glaring down at me. Once I've made eye contact, Karen starts in on me, while topless and holding baby, so very vulnerable, about how I'm blocking the nurse from caring for her baby. When I try to explain I asked before setting things up, she refuses to listen and continues to lecture and gets more aggressive and angry about how I'm causing her baby not to receive appropriate care and am pushing her out of the care area. After all the emotional stress and frustration of being in the hospital, I finally snapped, looked at the nurse, and told her to take away the screen. The nurse was horrified and started saying, "But your privacy," to which I replied firmly, "It would seem my privacy and modesty don't matter as much as Karen's comfort. Get rid of the screen." This pissed off Karen even more as she realized she'd have to spend the next hour staring at my topless self. She got very annoyed and uncomfortable, especially when the doctors managing rounds and both got flustered and tried to insist I get a new screen. I may have been the AH, but I simply was done, and stared right back and said, "According to my neighbor here, my privacy doesn't matter, so we all get to be uncomfortable. When I tell you, if looks could kill, I'd be dead, I'm not joking." The doctors didn't want to deal with it, and the nurses who had to deal with it were laughing quite a bit. They then brought the screen back out and tried to show Karen that they can totally see all her baby's stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. I wish I could say this was the last time she freaked out about this, but she pulled this same kind of stunt almost every time I tried to snuggle my baby, until her baby was finally discharged a week later. But seeing the look of shock on her face when I just forced everyone to look at my boobs is probably going to make me giggle every time I think of it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.